My name is Liam, and I've always been a city guy. I'm a graphic designer, the kind who spends most days hunched over a laptop in coffee shops, where the wildest thing that happens is trying out a new fusion place in a sketchy neighborhood. My apartment in Seattle screams urban life, tiny balcony, a glimpse of the Space Needle, and the never-ending hum of traffic playing in the background. Nature. That's always been something I admired, from a distance, preferably through a National Geographic documentary or one of my outdoorsy friends' Instagram stories. Then there's James. He's been my best friend since college and is basically a walking REI catalog, always planning his next hike, rock climb, or whitewater rafting trip. His place is stacked with gear for every possible outdoor adventure, and he's got that permanent sun-kissed look from spending weekends scaling cliffs, not binge-watching Netflix like me. Even though we were total opposites, or maybe because of it, we stayed close for nearly a decade. We pushed each other out of our comfort zones in small, steady ways. For months, James had been trying to get me to join him on a backpacking trip through the Cascade Mountains. "It'll change your life," he'd say, flashing photos of jaw-dropping views and peaceful alpine lakes. I always said no. Deadlines, poor fitness, or a totally made-up mosquito allergy. Take your pick. But then, 2 days before a planned 3-day trek along the Pacific Crest Trail, his usual hiking partner broke his ankle. And, strangely, I said yes. Maybe it was the disappointment in James's voice when he called to cancel our weekly dinner. Or maybe it hit me. I was 33 and starting to feel like life was shrinking around me. Comfort hardening into something dangerously close to stagnation. "You're serious?" James asked, clearly shocked. "Don't sound so surprised," I replied, already second-guessing myself. "I can handle a walk in the woods." James laughed, warm but a little worried. "Liam, this isn't a walk in the woods. It's a 28-mile trail with serious elevation. We'll be camping 2 nights. That made my stomach twist, but I refused to back out. "You've got extra gear I can borrow, right?" "Of course," he said, now more excited than surprised. "We can take some shortcuts to make it easier since it's your first time." And just like that, 2 days later, I found myself in James's Subaru heading east from Seattle, surrounded by borrowed gear that looked way too complicated and definitely too heavy. During the 3-hour drive, James gave me a crash course in wilderness survival, how to purify water, why layering matters, and what to do if we saw a bear. Play dead for grizzlies, fight back for black bears. Stuff I desperately hoped would stay theoretical. "The weather's perfect," James said as we neared the trailhead. "Clear skies today, maybe a few clouds tomorrow. Nothing major." I nodded, trying to ignore the growing knot in my stomach. The city had disappeared behind us, replaced by towering mountains and dense, whispering forests. We hadn't even started hiking, and already I felt out of place. The trailhead parking lot was nearly empty. A few cars, covered in bumper stickers about national parks and hiking. James helped adjust my backpack. It somehow felt like it was filled with bricks, even though he swore it was just the essentials. "Ready?" he asked, scanning my face. He looked completely in his element. Sun-kissed skin, tousled brown hair, and a strong build that could have come straight out of an outdoor magazine. I, on the other hand, looked like someone pretending to be an outdoorsman in hiking boots and a moisture-wicking shirt I panic-bought the day before. "As I'll ever be," I muttered, faking a confidence I definitely didn't feel. The first few hours weren't as bad as I feared. The trail was well marked, the weather gorgeous, and James kept a relaxed pace, stopping often to point out wildflowers or scenic overlooks. To my surprise, I actually started to enjoy it. The steady rhythm of walking, the pine-scented air, the way my usually racing mind began to slow down. "See? Not so bad," James said as we stopped for lunch on a rocky ledge overlooking a valley blanketed in evergreens. "I'll admit it's not terrible," I replied, trying not to give him too much satisfaction. "But I reserve the right to start whining tomorrow when my legs revolt." James grinned and handed me a bag of trail mix, heavy on the chocolate, just how I like it. "Your body will get used to it," he said. "And the views. They only get better from here." We pushed on after lunch. The trail got steeper and more demanding. By mid-afternoon, our playful banter faded as I focused on breathing and ignoring the burning in my shoulders and thighs. James noticed. "We'll set up camp soon," he promised. "There's a great spot by a small lake, about 2 miles ahead, almost halfway through today's stretch." I just nodded, too tired to talk. As we climbed higher, the landscape shifted. Trees thinned, the underbrush faded. Despite the aching in my body, I couldn't help but notice how beautiful it all was. Sunlight filtered through the branches in golden patterns. Snow-capped peaks peeked through the trees. And best of all, no car horns, no sirens, just quiet. We were about a mile from camp when I noticed the clouds. The storm rolled in fast over the ridge ahead, dark, heavy, and full of rain. James saw it too. His easygoing expression hardened into concern. "That wasn't in the forecast," he muttered, pulling out his phone. "No service, of course." "Is that bad?" I asked, watching the sky grow darker by the second. "Probably just a passing shower," he replied, though the uncertainty in his voice said otherwise. "Let's pick up the pace just in case." We moved faster now. The trail turned rocky and uneven, and I stumbled more than once, my city legs no match for the wild. Rain began to fall just as we crossed a small stream, starting as a drizzle but quickly turning into a relentless downpour. Visibility dropped to just a few yards. "This way," James shouted over the roar of the rain. "There's a split in the trail. We can take a shortcut to the campsite." I stayed close behind him as he veered off onto a narrow, barely visible path that twisted sharply to the right. Rain hammered down in sheets, soaking straight through my so-called waterproof jacket. The trail grew steeper, the ground slick with mud. Every step was a struggle to stay upright. Time blurred. All I could see was the trail ahead and James's silhouette leading the way. Flashes of lightning lit up the forest in brief, haunting flashes, each one followed by thunder that shook the ground beneath our boots. "James," I called out, my voice nearly lost in the storm. "Shouldn't we stop? Find shelter?" He glanced back at me, rain streaming down his face. "We're almost there," he yelled. "Just a little further." But something in the way he kept pausing, glancing around, checking the compass strapped to his backpack. It told me he wasn't as confident as he sounded. And suddenly, that tight knot in my stomach had nothing to do with exhaustion. "We're lost, aren't we?" I asked when the rain began to ease. James hesitated, avoiding my eyes. "I think I took the wrong turn back at the stream," he admitted quietly. This isn't the trail I remember." A chill ran through me, sharper than the cold wind. The fear settled heavy in my chest. "So, what now?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. James's years of outdoor experience kicked in like instinct. "First, we need to get out of this rain and find some shelter. Then we'll figure out how to get back on track." I nodded, clinging to the calm in his tone, even as panic flared behind my ribs. We slowed our pace, scanning the forest for anything that might offer cover. Daylight was fading quickly, partly from the storm clouds, partly because the evening was closing in. "There," James said, pointing through the veil of rain. I followed his gaze to a dark opening in the side of a rocky slope. It wasn't quite a cave, but it was a deep overhang, just enough to get us out of the worst of the downpour. We scrambled toward it, slipping on the muddy ground. The space was about 8 feet deep, 6 feet high, and blessedly dry near the back. We dropped our soaked packs with heavy thuds. "Well," James said, attempting a light tone, "this is an adventure." I shot him a look. "Is that what we're calling it now?" His smile faded. "I'm sorry, Liam. I should have checked the weather better. Should have stuck to the main trail." The honesty in his voice washed away the frustration rising in me. I sighed. "It's not your fault. You couldn't have predicted this storm." He nodded, then switched gears quickly. "We need to get dry and warm. If the temperature keeps dropping, these wet clothes could be dangerous." He was right. Even through the mix of adrenaline and fatigue, I could feel the cold creeping in. My clothes clung to me, soaked, heavy, and freezing. James rummaged through his backpack, which thankfully had held up better than mine, and pulled out a compact camping stove. "Good news. We can make something warm to drink," he said, setting it up near the entrance. "Bad news. Most of our gear is soaked." I checked my own pack and confirmed it. Everything, from my spare clothes to my sleeping bag, was damp or downright dripping. James's gear fared a little better, but even his backup clothes were too wet to be useful. Outside, the rain kept coming. Wind shoved it sideways into the forest. Night was settling fast, the world outside our little hideout dissolving into shadows. James heated water from his canteen and handed me a steaming metal cup of tea. The warmth between my hands was a small comfort, but it didn't solve the real problem. "We need to get out of these wet clothes," James said after we drank, his voice serious again. "Hypothermia's a real risk up here, especially overnight." "And change into what?" I asked, gesturing toward the soaked pile of clothing. James hesitated, then in a quiet, steady voice said— In a neutral voice, James said, "We don't change into anything. Body heat's our best chance right now." I stared at him as the meaning clicked. "You're saying we take off our clothes and share body heat?" "Yes," he replied simply. "It's standard survival. Wet clothing pulls heat away faster than bare skin." Logically, I knew he was right, but the idea of stripping down next to James, my best friend for nearly 10 years, stirred a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't quite name. "We'll use the emergency blanket," he added, pulling out a crinkly silver square. "It's not much, but it's dry. It'll help trap the heat." I nodded slowly, pushing past the awkwardness. "Okay, if that's what we have to do." James gave me a reassuring smile. "I promise to respect your virtue." His little joke lightened the tension just enough to make me smile. "My virtue's the least of my concerns right now." We turned our backs to each other, more out of courtesy than necessity, and began peeling off our soaked layers. My hands shook, whether from cold or nerves, I wasn't sure. Shirt, thermal pants, socks. Each removed layer made the chill sharper. Down to my underwear, I hesitated. I heard James pause, too. "On 3, he offered, voice tight. "Sure," I replied, oddly grateful for the countdown. 1, 2, 3. I slipped them off quickly, wrapping my arms around myself. When I turned around, James was a few feet away, just as bare, just as uncertain. In the dim light, I caught a glimpse of him. Broad shoulders, defined arms, a line of hair down his chest. I looked away quickly, warmth rising to my face despite the freezing air. James unfolded the emergency blanket with a loud crinkle. "Come on," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "Back to back is probably best." I nodded and moved toward him. We sat on our folded sleeping bags, the ground beneath cold and unwelcoming. James wrapped the thin blanket around our shoulders, barely big enough for the both of us. Our backs touched, skin against skin, and a jolt of warmth passed between us. His body radiated heat, and I leaned into it without thinking. At first, we sat stiffly, trying to honor the unspoken boundaries between us. "Try to relax," James murmured after a few minutes. "Tension burns energy. We need that warmth." I exhaled slowly, letting my shoulders ease. He was right. It was warmer this way. Outside, the storm raged on. Wind howled through the trees. Rain hammered the ground. Darkness had completely fallen. The beam from James's headlamp cast a soft circle of light on the rocky wall in front of us. "How long do you think the storm will last?" I asked, needing something, anything, to focus on besides the surreal intimacy of our situation. "Hard to say," James replied, his voice a soft vibration against my back. "Mountain weather's unpredictable. Could clear by morning," James said, shifting slightly behind me. "Or it could stay like this for a while." He didn't sugarcoat it, and neither of us spoke for a few seconds as the gravity of our situation settled in. Rain or not, we'd have to try finding our way back to the main trail eventually. We had enough food to last a few days, but with everything soaked, exposure was becoming a real threat. This wasn't just an uncomfortable night in the woods anymore. This was dangerous. As if reading my thoughts, James spoke again, his voice calm and steady. "Don't worry too much. I left our planned route and timeline with my emergency contact before we left. If we don't check in by our scheduled return, they'll call search and rescue." "How long would that take?" I asked. "We're due back the day after tomorrow. Add some buffer, probably 3, maybe 4 days before anyone comes looking." 3 or 4 days? Out here, in the cold? My stomach turned. I shivered, partly from the cold, partly from the fear. James must have noticed. "We should probably adjust," he said after a pause. "Back to back isn't the best for conserving heat." I forced my voice to stay even. "What do you suggest?" "Side by side would be better. More surface contact." He said it like he was reading straight from a survival guide, not suggesting we press in even closer under one thin emergency blanket. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Okay." We shifted, awkwardly at first. The emergency blanket crackled with every small movement. Eventually, we managed to settle shoulder to shoulder, hips touching, the blanket pulled tightly around us. It was definitely warmer, no question about that, but it was also more intimate. "Better?" James asked, his voice unexpectedly close to my ear. "Warmer," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. Time passed strangely in that little pocket of shelter. The rhythmic drum of rain, the shared heat, the exhaustion pressing down on us like a weight. We spoke in quiet bursts, about work, friends, movies, normal things that felt oddly surreal in the middle of a storm on a mountain. But as the night wore on, the temperature dropped even further. Even side by side, it wasn't enough. I started to shake again, teeth chattering despite my best efforts to stay still. "This isn't working well enough," James said, concern creeping into his voice. "I'm worried about you." "I'm open to suggestions," I managed through clenched teeth. He hesitated only a second before saying, "We need to lie front to front. Maximum contact. It's the best way to conserve heat." My stomach flipped. "You mean spooning?" "Essentially, yeah," he admitted. "I know it's awkward, but it's the best shot we've got to stay warm enough to make it through the night." He wasn't wrong. The discomfort, the awkwardness, none of it mattered more than staying safe. "Okay," I said quietly. We shifted once more, lying on our sides, James's chest against my back. His arm settled gently around my waist, holding me close. The emergency blanket still covered us, though our feet poked out at the bottom. The position was undeniably intimate, far more than anything we'd shared before in a decade of friendship, but also undeniably warmer. "Is this okay?" James asked softly, his breath warm on the back of my neck. "Yes," I replied, surprised to realize I meant it. Despite the awkward start, there was something grounding, almost comforting, in the closeness. The storm outside raged on, but here, wrapped in warmth, I didn't feel so alone. The steady rhythm of James's breathing slowly quieted the panic inside me, and with it, something I hadn't felt all day began to return, a fragile, flickering sense of calm. Just as I started drifting toward sleep, James spoke softly into the darkness. "There's something I've been meaning to tell you," he said. "Probably not the best timing, but I don't know. Facing something like this makes things feel more urgent." His words snapped me fully awake, suddenly aware of every place our bodies touched under the emergency blanket. "What is it?" I asked. He took a deep breath, and I felt his chest rise against my back. "I've had feelings for you," he said quietly. "For a while now. More than just friendship." The words hung between us, heavy, unexpected, impossible to ignore. My mind reeled, flashing through years of shared memories, camping trips, inside jokes, late-night talks. All of it suddenly shifted in meaning. "You don't have to say anything," James continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know the timing's terrible. I'm not expecting anything. If this storm had gone worse, I didn't want to leave it unsaid." My heart pounded so loud I was sure he could hear it. "How long?" I managed to ask. "A couple years," James admitted. "Maybe more. I didn't always realize it. It just grew." I lay there, frozen, not from the cold, but from the weight of everything he'd just revealed. James, my best friend for nearly a decade, and he'd been carrying this, quietly, the whole time. "I'm sorry if I made things weird," he added quickly, mistaking my silence. "We can forget I said anything." "No," I interrupted, surprising both of us. "I'm glad you told me. I need to think." He nodded, a movement I felt more than saw. "Of course. No pressure." Silence fell again, but now it wasn't filled with fear or tension. It hummed with something unspoken. A quiet charge in the air. A shift. Despite the storm still whispering through the trees outside, I found my mind returning again and again to James's words. Had I ever thought of him that way? I'd always noticed how attractive he was. Calm, confident, quietly strong. I trusted him more than anyone. Maybe I just never let myself go there. Maybe I'd been afraid to disrupt the rhythm of what we had. Outside, rain tapped gently against the rocks, but it felt distant now, less important than the thoughts swirling in my head. James's breathing deepened, slow and steady. He might have fallen asleep. I envied that kind of peace, that quiet after opening himself up so completely. Eventually, sleep found me too. When I woke, the light in our little shelter had changed. Morning. The rain had stopped, though droplets still dripped lazily from the trees. James was already awake, still close, but more alert. "Morning," he said gently as I stirred. "Storm's past. I'd like to reach the station before it gets late." We pushed forward, moving toward the ranger station. We hoped to reach it before the weather turned again, our conversation drifting to lighter topics, work updates, a mutual friend's recent engagement, a movie we'd both been meaning to see. But beneath the casual banter, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet awareness of possibilities I hadn't allowed myself to consider before. It was early afternoon when we finally spotted the ranger station, a small weathered cabin nestled in a clearing. I'd never seen anything so beautiful. It stood as a symbol of safety, a return to civilization. As we approached, a figure stepped out of the cabin, a uniformed ranger who looked surprised to see us coming from that direction. "You folks okay?" she called, walking toward us. "You're coming from an undesignated trail area." James quickly explained our situation: the sudden storm, the wrong turn, the night spent seeking shelter. Her face grew more serious with every word. "You're lucky," she said when he finished. "We've lost 3 hikers in that area in the last 2 years. These storms can be deadly if you're not prepared." She looked us over, noting our damp clothes and exhausted faces. "Come on inside. You can dry off and I'll radio in your location so your emergency contacts know you're safe." Inside the cabin was simple but blissfully warm and dry. A wood stove flickered in the corner. The ranger, Kelly, introduced herself and handed us thermal blankets and steaming mugs of coffee as we shed our wet outer layers. "Search and rescue's been alerted," she said after making the radio call. "Standard protocol when hikers go off route, even briefly. They'll probably want to give you a once-over. Sounds like you handled things pretty well out there." Across the room, James caught my eye and gave me a small, knowing smile. "We did what we had to do to survive," he said. There was a weight behind those words that didn't go unnoticed. My cheeks flushed, though not from the cabin's warmth. Kelly, misreading my reaction, suggested I sit farther from the stove. "Hypothermia recovery can mess with your body's thermostat," she said kindly. "No need to overheat now." About an hour later, a helicopter arrived. Apparently, getting lost in the mountains warranted a serious evacuation. The rescue team gave us quick medical checks, declaring us mostly fine aside from mild hypothermia and some scrapes, and prepared us for the flight back. As we boarded, James by my side, and our salvaged gear stowed away, I felt a strange pang of regret. Despite the danger, despite the discomfort, the experience had felt meaningful. We'd been vulnerable in a way that stripped everything back, and we'd seen parts of each other that might never have surfaced in our comfortable everyday lives. The helicopter rose into the sky, the ranger station shrinking below us. James's hand found mine as the force of the ascent pressed us into our seats. That simple touch, so familiar yet suddenly charged with new meaning, stirred something deep inside me. I turned to him, finding his gaze already on mine. A question lived in his eyes, though the roar of the blades made words impossible. I squeezed his hand in reply, not an answer but a promise, a conversation still to come. When we were safely back in our world, his smile was brighter than any sunbeam we'd seen cutting through the trees. As the wilderness stretched out below us, I realized I'd come back with more than just a story of survival. I'd found a new way of seeing someone who'd been beside me all along. Whether that vision would grow into something more, that was a trail yet to be explored. But for the first time, I was excited to see where it might lead. 2 days later, showered, rested, and fully recovered, I sat across from James in a small cafe in downtown Seattle. The soft clatter of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, and the cozy chair beneath me all felt strangely surreal after the wildness of the forest. "So," James said, wrapping his hands around his coffee mug, "we survived." "We did," I said, smiling. "Thanks to your wilderness expertise and your questionable emergency warming strategies." He laughed, warm and genuine. "Hypothermia is no joke, but I'll admit it wasn't exactly how I imagined getting you naked for the first time." His boldness sent a rush of heat to my face, but I didn't look away. "And how did you imagine it?" His brows lifted, amused. "Something a little more conventional. Dinner, maybe. Dancing. Definitely fewer survival tactics and more actual consent." "I consent to dinner," I said, surprising myself. "Maybe dancing too, though I should warn you I'm as bad at that as I am at reading trail maps." His smile spread slowly, like sunlight spilling over mountain tops, gentle, then dazzling. "Are you asking me on a date, Liam?" "I think I am," I replied, the certainty growing stronger as I said it. "That trip made me realize something. You've been a constant in my life for years, always there, always seeing me, even when I was too caught up in routine to see you back." James reached across the table, his hand covering mine just like he had in the helicopter. "And what do you see now?" I turned my hand under his, letting our fingers intertwine naturally. "Possibilities, a different kind of adventure, if you're still up for exploring it with me." "I've been ready for years," James said softly, "just waiting for you to want to take that path." As we sat there, hands linked across the table, I thought about how sometimes we have to get completely lost to find where we're truly meant to be. My name is Liam, and sure, I'm still a city guy at heart, but I've learned that the most important journeys aren't always about places on a map.